Hello, this is Stephen Wilson, and I'm in my studio today, and let's turn it off. And I'm here to do an experimental kind of question and answer session. I've never done anything like this before, but I'm here with my technical team, Rob and Miles. Say hello, guys.
Hi there.
And they thought it was a good idea, so we're going to answer your questions, and I think we're going to do it by taking one of the pre-prepared questions first, and then I'm going to be reading your comments as they come in, and I may decide to answer one of the questions off here too. So, but we're going to start with one of the questions that you've already sent in, and I don't know what these questions are. This is all new to me. Yeah. Rob, what is the first question?
The first question comes from Steve, and he says, do you find yourself getting an emotional reaction to certain songs as you work on them and as they develop?
Do I get an emotional reaction to the songs? Absolutely. I mean, if I'm not getting some kind of emotional kind of kick or response from the songs, then something's not right. I guess it's not, the song's not working. And I find particularly that the moment I've written a song is the moment that I'm closest to it emotionally. Mm-hmm. And like a lot of songwriters, I do demos, so I demo a song. And I've found over the years that the vocal performance that I make at the time I've literally just written the song is always the one when I feel the most emotionally kind of connected to the material. And it's very hard for me to go back 6 months later and try to recreate that feeling that I had when I'd originally written the song. So although your kind of emotional connection to a song changes over a period of time, certainly at that moment of kind of inception or conception, I think that there's a very strong emotional bond with the material and the lyrics. And if there isn't, then something's clearly wrong. Yeah. It should be.
All right, we've got another question here from Hamza. He says, what's the story behind your collaboration with Pendulum for the track The Fountain? Pendulum,
just for people who don't know, Pendulum were a British kind of drum and bass sort of pop act that were very, very big for a period. I think they've broken up now. Maybe they got back together recently. But about 6 or 7 years ago, they were very big in the UK. And the main guy in Pendulum, a guy called Rob Swire, gave an interview in Time Out in London, and he was asked what was his favourite music, and he rather flatteringly chose myself and Porcupine Tree as his favourite songwriter and favourite band. And I thought that was really nice, but then a few months later I got an invitation through his record company to write lyrics for a song on their new record, and he sent me a backing track. And it was a challenge, because it wasn't necessarily the kind of music I would normally, write myself or write lyrics for. But I'm a big fan of electronic music, so any sort of involvement with that world kind of always appeals to me. And I did it very quickly, and Rob was very happy, and it came out, and the album went to #1. So right now, it's the only #1 album I've ever been actively involved with.
Yeah, brilliant. Stefan says, have you ever thought of doing a show with an orchestra?
It's a lovely idea. Obviously the kind of conceit of rock bands doing shows with orchestras is not a new one. I mean, there's a whole history of artists that have tried to do shows with orchestra. In fact, even more recently, I think my friend Michael and Opeth, they did a show in Bulgaria with an orchestra. There's a lot of technical kind of logistical issues involved in doing that. There's the cost, literally the cost of hiring 20, 30, 40 plus musicians, and these guys don't turn up for rehearsals without getting paid either. So there would be there's a lot of expense involved in doing that. And I think I'm such a perfectionist that I would hate to walk on stage not knowing that everything was perfect and beautifully rehearsed. I would love to do it. I think the simple answer to your question is I would love to do it. It's just a question of when, I suppose, and the right project. Mm-hmm. Maybe I should take, let's have a look.
Yeah.
Let's take a question here. Do you like Dave Gahan? I've never met him. I do like Depeche Mode very much. Yes, so I guess the answer is yes. What's the story behind Heart Attack in a Lay-By? Now you picked one of my favourite songs there. I love that song. That was one of 3 songs on that record in absentia that were pretty much just solo performances, and that's one of my favourites. And that song was about the idea of a guy basically driving home, having had an argument with his wife or his partner, either the same morning or the night before, and kind of thinking of all the things he's going to say to kind of make it up to her and how he's going to make everything right, except he doesn't realise he's having a heart attack and he's never going to make it home. So it's one of those songs that always kind of, you know, the songs I always kind of like to write are songs about regret and about loss, and particularly about regrets. And I suppose that song is kind of a regret song. It's this idea of leaving things not right. So, you know, this kind of fear I have of, you know, leaving this world, leaving this existence, not having put things right, not having made things right with the world. And there's something very sad about people that never have that chance to, you know, make things right. Families who die, you know, somebody in the family will die and then you find out that they were kind of estranged from their kids and they never had the opportunity to kind of make up or get back together again. And I think there's a lot of pathos about that, and it's something that kind of really touches me very deeply, the idea of the letter never sent, you know, the I love you that was never said for whatever reason, and not being able to put things right. So Heart Attack in a Lay-By is a song about not being able to put things right, I guess. Cheerful song. Let's have another question from Rob.
All right, Jukka asks, in retrospective, what is the best mistake you've made regarding your music or your life? Or in other words, in retrospective, what mistake are you happy that you made that taught you something valuable?
I think the best thing, it's almost a cliche to say it, and the best thing that ever happened to me, the best thing that ever happened to me was not being successful early in my career writing pop music. And I tried, you know, the first band that I ever really got, you know, off the ground with was a band called No Man, I'm sure some people know. And we signed a record deal in the early 90s with a very hip label, a label called One Little Indian, who have Bjork and Shaman at the time were very big artists they had. And they pushed us to write pop music. And it wasn't really something, I mean, although I love pop, I don't think it was something I was naturally very good at. I think I was better at doing the other sort of more kind of willfully obscure and arty stuff. But for whatever reason, we kind of went down this road of trying to write high energy electronic pop, you know, and we quite liked some of it, but some of it we didn't feel so comfortable about. But like a lot of people at the beginning of their career, we do anything in order to get a foothold in the industry, just to be able to say we were professional musicians. So we compromised. And I think that was important for me because it wasn't successful. And I think if it had been successful, I would have been locked into a pattern and a career path that would have made me very unhappy. And I think in that sense, it was the best thing that could have happened to me. Failure was the best thing that could have happened to me at that time. It made me say to myself, you know what? Fuck it. I can't write pop music. I'm not good at it. I'm just going to do what I want to do and what comes naturally and what I believe I'm the best at doing. And that really set the template for the rest of my career. So it started out almost like, you know, two fingers up at the industry. I'm just going to do what I do and I don't care if anyone buys it. And it was ironically at that moment that my career started to develop and people started to listen to my music. And I realised that actually there is an audience out there that do want artists to be true to themselves and do want artists to be unique and you know, and be quirky and not necessarily do what the industry expects them to do. So I think that was a very important lesson to learn, and I'm glad that those early attempts to kind of get a foothold in the mainstream pop industry were not successful.
All right, Ian asks, he says, hello Stephen, given how well received Ninette Tayeb's contribution was to Hand Cannot Erase and Live, is there any chance of further collaborations with her?
Yes, Ninette's already sung on 2 songs on my next record, which I'm working on right now, and she's going to be a lot more involved in the next records. She's amazing, and she's a lot of fun to work with. And I think you have to understand that the first time I worked with Ninette was right at the end of the recording process for Hand Cannot Erase. So I think if I'd sort of been, you know, working with her before that, she would have probably featured more on that record too. So I think you can safely say she'll be much more of a major player on the next record. Yeah.
All right, Jordan says, hey Stephen, I know about your love and admiration of David Lynch, as do I, but I was just wondering if you have a favourite of his films.
Well, my favourite Lynch film would be arguably my favourite film, period, which is The Elephant Man, and probably closely followed by Mulholland Drive and Eraserhead in that order. But I think Elephant Man for me is the one because it has everything that I love about David Lynch. It has the kind of visual vocabulary that we love of his, and it has the kind of perversity of his, you know, his kind of aesthetic, but it also has this incredibly touching emotional kick to it because it is such a powerful true life story. And the performances in that movie, everything, Anthony Hopkins, John Hurt's, just sublime. For me, that's a movie I don't think you can watch it and not be incredibly moved. But at the same time, it's pure David Lynch. And I think that for me makes it his greatest achievement.
Pierre Francis says, what is the breed of your dog?
She's a Chihuahua. She's the smallest little doggy you can buy. Shall I take another one off of...
yeah, absolutely, yeah. Go for
take
it.
another one off of the iPad here. As people are sending questions. Let's have a look. Anyway, what do you think about the next Opeth's album, Sorceress? What do you think about the self-titled track that just have opened to the public? I think it's brilliant. I mean, Michael for me is the guy that always raises the bar, and I kind of feel in a way, you know, competitive with him. Not in a kind of destructive way, but in a positive way. That he's the guy. When I listen to what he's doing, I'm like, shit. I really need to, you know, to pull out my A game because he just writes the most incredible stuff. The new record is great. I've only listened to it once all the way through, but it's fantastic, and people are not going to be disappointed.
Yeah, brilliant. Sviler says, have you studied in any type of music school, taken instrument lessons, or do you know music theory? If so, what did you learn from it, and what did you learn from other sources?
I'm of the opinion that actually, and I think history largely bears me out on this, the greatest pop music and rock music has been made by people who are intuitive talents, not trained talents. And I think this is different to, say, the world of classical music or jazz music, where you can go to Juilliard or whatever and you can study, and that gives you a grounding to write great classical music or whatever. When it comes to pop music and rock music, there's something about it that it's just best when it's made by people who are not trained. And I think history bears me out. There's virtually no good music ever come out of music school. This is just my opinion, okay? So I'm sure people are going to come up with some exceptions, and I'm sure there are some exceptions. I can't think of them off the top of my head. I can't read music. I can't write music. I don't know the names of the chords I play a lot of the time. And I kind of approach music from the point of view of being an idiot. You know, I'm an idiot, but I have a sound in my head. I have a music in my head, and over the years I've learnt ways to get that out of my head into the real world. And none of that learning to get that out into the real world has involved going to learn how to write music or read music, or even understanding what any of these boxes do. I mean, I literally, the first thing I do when I get a new keyboard is I throw the manual in the bin, you know, and I just play with it. And I think you can learn everything, but you can't learn to hear. And I think people forget that you have to hear it in your head first. Finding a way to get it out into the real world is kind of academic at that point. I mean, sure, you make mistakes. I mean, I made some records that didn't sound very good in the early days, but I've got better and better as I've learned by my mistakes. But I'm not sure that learning music or learning how to record music would have really helped, because I wasn't interested in doing things in the prescribed way anyway. So I don't know if that answers the question, but the simple answer is no. I have no training at all in music.
Oscar asks, have you decided on a direction for your next album yet?
I'm still searching. I mean, I've written a lot of music already, and it's all over the place. The one thing I know is it's going to be different, and I think that's the most important thing to me. Is the biggest at this stage in my career, the biggest influence on the direction of my music is what I've already done, if that makes sense, because I don't want to repeat myself. So I've made four solo records I've made over the last 5 or 6 years now. For me, they're all very different. At least in my head, they all seem very different, and I think to people that listen to them too. And the fifth one will be different again. I think possibly a bit less emphasis on the classic rock elements, more song-based, a bit more use of electronics. I mean, still a rock album, of course, but more use of electronics. I went out and bought a lot of synthesizers over the last year to play with. By the way, the music you heard at the beginning is not going to be the direction of the new record. Different, more Ninette involved, reaching out to a few new people to collaborate with. More than that I can't say at the moment. Should I take another question hi Steve, I wait for Porcupine Tree concerts in Germany. You'll be waiting a long time, mate. That band doesn't exist anymore. So maybe I'll take another one. People asking me about chords here. What's the last record you listened to? I listened to a Miles Davis record this morning. What's your favourite Rush album? Wow, I love so many. I really love Moving Pictures. I know it's kind of everyone's favourite, isn't it? But it's such a classic record, and for me, it has the best of everything that went before and everything that went after. The slightly more pop sensibility of the later albums with the more kind of ambitious conceptual rock aspects of their earlier albums, and for me, that's the album where both elements are perfectly in balance. I love that record. I love Signals. Those two. Yeah.
All right, James says, hi Stephen, much has been said about your musical influences instrumentally. I was wondering if growing up you had any singers who influenced your vocal style.
I liked, I never thought of myself as a singer. And I still don't. I mean, I have a very limited, range of things I can do with my voice. I'd love to be able to sing like Marvin Gaye or Jeff Buckley or Amy Winehouse, but I can't, and that's nature. So I make the best of my voice, and I think one of the things that was really important to me was discovering great harmony singing. And so I think you hear it particularly in the late 90s on albums like Stupid Dream and Signified, some of those Porcupine Tree albums. I'm really getting into tracking my voice with harmonies. And that really came from listening to the Beach Boys, the classic Beach Boys stuff, Pet Sounds, Smile, Todd Rundgren, and Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young. Those three artists for me were kind of an obsession for about a year, and I listened to them so much and learnt so much about how to arrange for multi-track harmony singing. So that kind of answers your question. I guess that was an influence on my singing, or what I did with my voice anyway.
All right, Wayne says, Stephen, is there any chance of a Stephen Wilson themed cruise? Solo work, Porcupine Tree, No Man, Blackfield, Bass Communion, I.E.M, and of course any bands that you wanted to join?
Just the logistics of putting that together blow my mind. I think that firstly, I certainly wouldn't do it on a cruise. That's my idea of hell. But the idea of maybe doing a concert where I have perhaps more of my projects together in one place and one kind of event is an interesting idea. I tell you, last year I did 2 shows at the Royal Albert Hall. I'm sure some people know and maybe came to them. 2 shows at the Albert Hall, and I did 2 different sets, and I had guests. That in itself, at the end of those 2 days, I was absolutely shattered from rehearsing all that repertoire. And I'm a control freak, so I'm thinking about the lights, the screen, are the guests being looked after? Are my guests, is the hotel nice? Are they happy with the hotel? Have they got food? You know, what's the set list going to be? Are my band happy? Are all my friends, have they got the seats that they're supposed to have? And I was just exhausted at the end of those 2 days. So the idea of adding into all that, the idea of having multiple projects, I just think it would probably kill me. But I love the idea. I love the idea.
Josie says, where were you when you wrote Trains? And could you tell me a bit about how you wrote it? E.g. time span, was it a quick write or returning ideas?
Trains, you know, that's funny because that song became really a very popular song, if not the most popular song of my former band. And it was strange because for me, and I think probably a lot of songwriters have a similar kind of story. For me, it was just another song, and I wrote a bunch of songs for an album, and I put the best one, the 12 that I thought were the best on that record, and it wasn't my favourite song. It wasn't my least favourite either. It was just a song, and it took on a life of its own. It became the most requested song at the shows, which is great, you know. And I'm very proud of the song. I'm not saying it's not a good song. But the simple answer, but the reason I'm saying all this is that the answer to the question is, honestly, I don't remember. Yeah. I don't remember. It's 15 years ago now. And I mean, I grew up near to a train station, and you'll see kind of allusions to trains in a lot of my songs. Most recently in Happy Returns, the song on Hand Cannot Raise, is a line which I'm really proud of. You know, the years just pass like trains, I wave, but they don't slow down. There's something beautiful about the metaphor of trains, the kind of just watching trains go by, you know, there's something very poetic about that. And even the sound of trains for me, maybe because I grew up near to a station, has a kind of a nostalgic poetry to it. And I think Trains probably was my first attempt to try to tap in to that nostalgia for childhood, and nostalgia for a specific time in my life when things seemed much simpler. And when the summers seem to last forever, now they seem to pass in a moment, which I'm sure has something to do with the British weather, but not only. And I think Trains probably came from that place, but the specifics I don't remember too much about.
Yeah. Zavi says, what's the last thing you do before going on stage, and how do you feel when you start performing?
The last thing I do on stage is I put these things on my glasses to stop them from falling off. Because people probably are amazed when they see me that headbanging on stage that they don't fall off. Well, they don't fall off because I have two little clips around the back that hold them in place. Otherwise it would be very difficult to perform with them. And then my band have a little ritual, which I'm not going to tell you about because it's our little secret. We have a little ritual that we do before we go on stage. When I walk on stage, usually these days, now I say this because it didn't always used to be this case. I used to be so nervous before going on stage. Even to the early days of my solo band, I was still incredibly nervous, really terrified that everything was going to go wrong. And the last 3 or 4 years it's really turned for me, and now I walk on stage feeling like I'm standing in front of the greatest band on the planet and the greatest show that you'll see at this level. I'm not putting myself, you know, okay, you can go and see Roger Waters and he might have a bigger show than me, or Muse, but at this level I think I've got one of the best bands and one of the best shows out there, and that makes me feel really confident now. And I have a confidence walking on stage now that even taking me out of the equation, forget me, everything else is brilliant, you know, and I'm somehow the guy that's privileged enough to be standing at the front conducting this or whatever. I'm not even conducting, I don't even have to do that anymore. Everyone just knows exactly what they're doing. And we have so much fun, and it's fun. I think that's the word, it's fun. And again, I say that as someone that for years, literally first 2 decades of my career, couldn't really enjoy performing live. It wasn't something I naturally was inclined to do. The whole idea of standing up on stage and having 2,000 people looking at you is bizarre. Just think about it, that's bizarre. You have to be someone with a massive ego to even think that's normal. And it's not normal, but it's fun. And I think if you embrace, and I've learned to embrace that and enjoy it.
David asks, any chance of seeing a second Storm Corrosion album?
It's funny, I've just read exactly the same question here from Andrew Abela. Okay, so I'm going to answer that. The thing about when myself and Michael did the first Storm Corrosion album is we didn't tell anyone we were doing it. I know there was rumours for years, and there was rumours we were going to do some kind of metal album, which was the last thing, by the way, that we would have wanted to do when the time came. I think we wanted to do something complete opposite of what people expected us to do, which is what we did. And we didn't tell anyone that we'd started it, and we both said to each other, you know what, if this is shit, or if we're not pleased with it and we don't think it's good, then we'll just say, okay, we had some fun in the studio drinking wine and making music, but nothing came of it. And we didn't put pressure on ourselves to make something that we would release into the world. And the same is still true. And let's just say this, I'd be very surprised if we wouldn't at some point get back together in a room with a couple of bottles of wine and try and make music again. But I'm not guaranteeing that we would release it. I think we would only release it if we felt it was good. And we felt that about the first album. We knew it was going to blow a few minds, and we knew it was going to disappoint a few people who were expecting some kind of progressive metal supergroup. And of course it was the antithesis of that. So I think the same is true. I think we'll try, but I'm not promising there will be actually a physical commercial release.
All right, Rafa says, how do you feel about the use of Autotune? Some people say it shouldn't be used at all. Some say it's okay to use it with moderation. What do you think?
I'm in the latter camp. I don't use Autotune. I use something called Melodyne, which is similar. I do use it because you know what? Sometimes you can be, and I say I'm not the greatest singer. Sometimes I can be performing and I'll get a vibe I really like. It's just a bit out of tune. And it's great to be able to not have to go back and sing it more perfectly, but without the feeling that you had on that take, to go back and just tighten up the tuning. Now, here's the thing. If I can hear it, I hate it. Mm-hmm. For me, most modern pop music now, I can hear the auto-tune, and it drives me crazy. It sounds like every modern pop song has got Stephen Hawking on vocals. It sounds like a robot singing. And I know it's almost become like a sound in its own right. You know, people kind of aspire to that sound. You know, but when Radiohead used it on Kid A, it was like this kind of production gag, the title track of Kid A. And you know, that's fine. And also I think it's fine to use it, but use it in a way that just tightens up the pitching. For me, it's make it transparent, make it seem like it's not there. If I can hear auto-tune, and it does have a very strong signature, when people overuse it, and I'm not sure sometimes if it's people overusing it because they don't know what they're doing, or if they're overusing it because they like the effect of it. Personally, I hate the sound of over-tuned vocals. But I've used it as a production gag. There's a little part in The Raven That Refused to Sing where the bird sings, and that was actually done using auto-tune in an extreme setting as a kind of production sort of trick, a production gag. But that's hopefully the only time you'll ever really hear the signature of Melodyne or auto-tune on my music.
Have we had any more come in on the chat that you want to answer?
Yeah, let's have a look. Are you catching Pokemons today? No, I don't play computer games, so I'm vaguely aware of this phenomenon going on. What is your opinion about Frank Zappa's Hot Rats? It's a masterpiece. How many bottles cost the first album? I don't understand that question. Dream acts you wish to produce? Well, I don't really have time to produce albums, but I love remixing. You know, I do some remixing work, as some people know, classic artists. And top of my list for years has been Kate Bush, and I've tried to through various contacts persuade her to let me remix some of her albums in 5/1, but she's not interested, which is fair enough. But she's still top of my list anyway.
Yeah. All right, Matthias says, Stephen, your interest in filmmaking and script writing is widely known, but it hasn't really taken off yet. The closest you've been to it dates back to the Deadwing era, but a lot has changed since then in terms of financing of independent projects. Would you consider crowdsourcing so that your fans and beyond could see a Stephen Wilson written film?
I'd love to, one of my big unfulfilled ambitions is to do a soundtrack to a movie, and I think in some ways the only way that's going to happen is if I also write it, because no directors seem to be knocking on my door. I think again it's a question of time. I don't, my life is very full at the moment. I would love one day to be involved either as a writer, as a soundtrack, acting even, or you know, just involved in a production. And I've talked with some of the people I work with, like Lasse and Jess, the animator. I've talked with them about maybe being involved in a project. If they had an idea, I could be involved somehow, production or, you know, whatever. I think it will happen. I think it will happen. Right now I'm focused on at least getting one more record done before I decide to do something perhaps different for a few years, like writing or you know, or something to do with film. And there's always the possibility that an invitation may come. I still, you know, keep my fingers crossed that will happen.
Michael asks, do you think the new media, like video games, can carry as much artistic value as film or music?
I don't know too much about that world, so it's difficult for me to answer that. I mean, I think my idea of computer games is still something circa 1991, you know. So, and I know that there are computer games these days which are very beautiful, very poetic, and you know, very kind of emotionally involving. And I'm just getting a little bit of window into that because there's an Italian company right now that are developing a computer game based on the song Drive Home, and the video and the characters that Hayao created for Drive Home. And they've sent me some stills and also some moving, and it looks absolutely stunning, absolutely beautiful. And I'm thinking, well, actually, maybe, you know, the computer games have obviously moved on a lot since I, you know, remember them. But I must confess, I'm not really that familiar with what's out there.
Shueto asks, what's the saddest and the happiest lyric that you've ever written?
The saddest one must surely be Routine. Happy. Have I ever written anything happy? I don't know. Happy. You tell me. Have I written any happy songs?
Happiness 3 or 4.5?
Yeah, but Happiness 3. It's kind of ironic, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, when I use words like happy and when I have a song called Perfect Life, it's obviously it's obviously ironic. Yeah. I don't know. Have I written any happy songs? Folks maybe can write in and tell me. I think there's a difference between happy songs and songs that make the people that listen to them feel happy, because I've always found, you know, sad music can be very uplifting and make me feel very good, you know. And I think Routine, you know, sad though it is very touching, very emotional, very beautiful, and it makes people feel good. But actually, happy songs about joy and happiness, I don't know if I've written any.
What about the Restful Flow from Lightbulb Sun?
Yes, good call. Restful Flow from Lightbulb Sun. Yeah, that's a kind of love song. It's kind of happy and joyful. Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
All right. Connor asks, hi Stephen, I'm a big fan of the Hank and Arrays packaging. Can we expect another extravagant deluxe edition of your next solo album?
I hope so. I mean, my idea is my catalogue would ultimately, you know, look like a library. You know, artwork is very important to me. I've never really understood the distinction between making music and the creative act of making the music, and the creative act as in terms of how you present the music, how you present the live show, how you present the website. You know, all of those things are part of, or they should be part of, an artist's aesthetic and a part of their creative vision. So for me, making the music is just the beginning. And then it's obviously a very important part of the process, but then it's all about the presentation, the artwork, the live show, the website, the way you present the music. And I think I will always be that kind of person. Sometimes it's a curse because it's a hand cannot raise with so much work, you know. I mean, it's amazing and I'm so proud of it. But writing the blog and all the text and then developing the artwork with Lasse, it was very time consuming, but very, very gratifying and very rewarding. And I think the response from the fan base made it all worthwhile.
Yeah. We've got another question about Hank and Arrays here.
Okay.
Laura asks, does the protagonist die at the end of Hank and Arrays, or is she taken by aliens?
Both of the. I mean, this is the thing. I'm a big fan of cinema. People know I'm a big fan of cinema. My favourite movies are almost always the ones that don't spoon feed you answers. I love movies that have ambiguities. I love movies where you're not sure. You know, like take a movie like Stanley Kubrick's 2001, where you're not quite sure what's happened at the end, but it makes you think. and it makes you draw your own conclusions. You know, and David Lynch has a lot of that in his movies too. And you ask him, why have you got that? He doesn't know either. You know, and I think there's a sense that sometimes, without wishing to sound pretentious, sometimes a piece of art can almost transcend the person that created it. I don't know is the answer. I think there's a number of possible conclusions to draw from Hand Cannot Raise. Is the whole thing happening in her mind? Does she die? Does she kill herself? Is she taken by aliens? Is the whole thing happening? I don't know either, and I don't think I want necessarily to come down on a specific, you know.
It's open to interpretation.
And I think that's the kind of art I like, you know, and I love movies like that too.
Yeah. Philip says, since your last album featured some really heavy elements in the form of ancestral, would you consider incorporating more metal influences in your future work?
I think for me, metal's part of my musical vocabulary now. I mean, there was a time when I was very into metal, particularly from listening to bands like Meshuggah and Opeth, and I definitely made a couple of records with Porcupine Tree that were almost on the verge of being, you could almost classify them as metal albums, I guess. In fact, I think some people do. I can't imagine ever making a record that was that much indebted to that style again. But, you know, as the person asked the question has kind of alluded to, there are still elements of that kind of pop up from time to time. You know, a crunchy riff, a heavy riff. There's a track called Vermilion Core on which is the last thing I wrote for the last record, on 4.5, which has got a big crunchy metal riff on it too. And I think as part of my musical language, it's going to pop up from time to time.
Nirav asks, do you think your studio makes a huge impact on your writing? Would you write similarly under different circumstances in a different studio, perhaps?
Sorry, say that again, because I was reading a question on here. This is the problem. I was ignoring you. What did you say?
Nirav says, do you think your studio makes a huge impact on your writing? Would you write similarly under different circumstances in a different studio, perhaps?
I think anything I write is going to sound like me, you know, for better or worse. I've tried to, you know, sometimes I deliberately try to change things up just to make things interesting for me and try to inspire me to perhaps do something a bit different. But whatever you do always ends. It's like whenever you look in the mirror, you always see you, basically, at the end of the day, looking back at yourself. So I think whatever I wrote with whatever kind of resources I had around me would ultimately sound like me. But I think what I do like is being in this room, is I have within reach here all of the things that I might feel like I need to touch at any given moment, whether it's the bass, the Telecaster, the acoustic guitar, the synths, the mellotron, the drum machines, I've got auto harp down there, I've got a harmonium, I've got a banjo over there in the corner. And I think for me, because of the kind of music I'm not the kind of guy who goes into a room with an acoustic guitar and comes out with an album. You know, I'm not Bob Dylan in that respect. And so for me, because of the kind of music I make, because it can come from anywhere, it can come from a guitar riff, a piano lick, a banjo, a drum pattern, a loop, a bass line, the sound of the auto harp or the harmonium or a vocal. I need to be able to have all of those things around me, and that's why, in a way, I feel I probably produce my best work in my studio here.
Ruby says, will the next album feature even more electronic sounds and textures when compared to Hand Cannot Erase?
Yes, it already does. Yeah, I've got a lot more electronic stuff going on now. I love it. I mean, electronic music, possibly my favourite kind of music to listen to. You know, I mean, for years, it's funny, people always ask me about the latest album by somebody who makes very similar music to me, and it's actually kind of the last thing I would listen to. You know, no offence to the artist in question. It's just I think a lot of musicians are like this. They tend to listen to music which is very different to the music they make, because it's like going to the office. You know, if you go and listen to an album that's similar to what you did, it's like going back to the office. You know, so I've spent many years listening to electronic music, and you know, artists like Aphex Twin, Square Pusher, Boards of Canada, Wolfgang Voigt, Plastic Man, and it's creeping more and more into my writing, actually. Particularly over the last couple of years, it's creeping more into the writing. So I think the answer is yes. It's still going to be a rock album, of course it is, but I think there will be more of a sense of electronics in there.
Martin asks, did you ever get the picture of Michael Alkafelt holding a sword framed on your wall, like you said you would in the Insurgentes documentary?
Did I? No, I didn't. Okay.
All right.
No, I didn't. I should have done, actually. That was pretty funny. Yeah. We've all been there. I mean, I've done photo shoots where I just knew I was dying inside because I just knew it was totally wrong. But sometimes you do things for the wrong thing for the right reason, and I guess in that case. But the whole metal world is awesome. That is brilliant. Okay, I only hope he's watching. If he's not, I'm gonna. Thank you very much, guys. You planned this, haven't you?
I thought you'd like that. Yeah,
I'll put that there. Okay, I love it. Awesome.
Yeah.
Shall I take one of these then?
Yeah, if you want.
Okay. Hi Stephen, I've been a fan some time and would love to introduce more music to your music. Will we see any other albums from other projects available on streaming services anytime soon? Yes, you will. I think the Porcupine Tree catalogue is starting to go on the streaming services from next month, and then No Man and Blackfield. It's all going to be up. Hopefully by the end of the year, it's all going to be. Sorry, I've got to take that away. I can't look at that in the screen. The rest of it. Appreciate it. Yeah, it's just too ridiculous. Yes, it's all going to be up on the Spotify and Tidal and Deezer and all those services by the end of the year. Yeah.
All right. James says, given that you've said that you feel the saddest music is the most uplifting, and the numerous memes and in-jokes about your music being depressing, how does it make you feel knowing that you and your music have actually saved some people by giving them a sense of belonging and expression?
I think, that comes back to what I was saying earlier. I mean, this whole thing about me, the music is melancholic, but I dispute utterly that it's depressing. If sad music was depressing, I'm sorry, but no one would listen to Pink Floyd, no one would listen to Radiohead, no one would listen to Nine Inch Nails, no one would listen to Nick Drake. This is incredibly beautiful, transcendently uplifting music, which tends to dwell on the human condition. And let's face it, being alive in the 21st century is not the greatest thing, is it? I mean, there's a lot of stuff that's wrong in the world. Without wishing to sound glib, there's a lot of stuff that you can look around at the world. When I look around at the world, I don't see an incredible amount to be positive about. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm not a happy person. I am. In fact, I kind of joke about it, but it's true. I do put a lot of the negative side of me into my songs in order that I can be a happy person, and I am. And I think people are sometimes surprised when they meet me that I'm not, Ian Curtis about to go and, well, I won't go into that, but that I'm not some depressive. And I think that there is a truism there that as an artist you can kind of exercise a lot of those negative things in the music, and I think. What you're touching on there, or what the person who asked the question is touching on there, is that can also be cathartic for other people. And that when they hear something very sad or very melancholic, or something about loss or regret or death or depression or loneliness or whatever it is, it makes them feel good. Why does it make them feel good? Because they understand they're not alone in the world in feeling those things, that we have this shared human experience. Everyone understands what it is like to lose a loved one, to feel lost, to feel depressed, to feel loneliness. Everyone understands those things. So when you write a song about that and you give that to people, I think that creates this incredible empathetic response from the listener. Not everyone relates to that. Some people probably do just find it depressing. But I think clearly people that listen to my music must like that, otherwise they wouldn't listen to it. And so they're responding in a very positive way to something, and I think they're responding in a positive way because it makes them understand that there is something very beautiful about this shared burden that we carry, the burden of awareness of mortality, awareness that our lives are ticking away, and we only have a set amount of time to be happy, to find the person to spend our lives with, to find the job that fulfills us. And let's face it, a lot of people never find those things. Yeah. And I think music gives them something to hold on to and to understand that is a kind of a universal problem.
Yeah. Raphael says, hi Stephen, I remember a couple of interviews that you gave a few years ago in which you mentioned that your favourite song that you had ever written was Stop Swimming from the Stupid Dream album. Has your opinion changed, or is it still the case? I
still love that song. I mean, I've written a lot of songs since then that I'm equally proud of. I think the title track of The Raven That Refused to Sing, for me, I'm very proud of. It's funny enough, it tends to be the more simple songs that I end up being the most proud of. Maybe because to me they're the ones that are hardest to write. But if you can capture some simple sentiment within a song like that, a relatively simple song, with relatively direct words, you know, and the words in The Raven That Refused to Sing are not clever, they're not complicated. They're very simple, direct words about loss. And that, for me, is a very rare thing, to create something that precious and exquisite. And that song for me is, I mean, if push comes to shove, if I had to pick one song now across my whole back catalogue, I think it would be that one. Yeah.
All right. Teresa says the majority of your UK shows are seated, and you've mentioned at the shows that you want to see people get into it and hear encouragement from the audience. Do you feed off the energy of crowds? And if you do, how do seating versus standing gigs impact on you and the band's performance?
It's a really difficult one, because about 3 years ago, my agent Neil Warner came to me and he said, "I've seen the show, and I think this is a show that should be in beautiful seated theatres." And I could totally understand why he said that, because there's a lot of visuals and the music's kind of very immersive, and you almost like want to just sit back and enjoy the spectacle. But at the same time, a part of me was really sad about that, because I love the live energy of a kind of rock and roll show, and I've missed at the seated shows. I've really missed that. There is a very symbiotic thing going on between audience and performance, and I don't think sometimes the audience realise how much they influence the show. They really do. And when you're playing to a room full of people who are all sitting there with their arms folded, it's tough. It's really tough, and I have had to learn. I've had to learn to deal with that, and to still be able to, you know, tell myself, no, they're enjoying it. They're just not able to show it because they're sitting down. But I miss the standing shows, and occasionally we do standing shows still, and I always look forward to those. So for me, there's no ideal. Well, actually, the ideal is a venue where there's both, and there are some venues now where you have standing area at the front and you have seating around the outside, and those venues for me are the best of all possibilities. Yeah.
All right. Yatin says, are you anxious when you send your demos to other members in the band for the first time before the recording process?
Anxious because they're not going to like them, or I guess is the insinuation. Not really, because I think that at this stage, as long as I'm excited about the material, that's all that matters to me. I say that, but there are actually people that are in front of those guys that hear the material even before those guys hear it, and Lasse is one of them. Actually, Lasse is someone I always send new songs to, and kind of get a feel from him if it's something that's going to, fly or not. And I think by the time I present them to the band, I'm pretty confident that I've got the material the way I want it to. So, yeah, I'm not nervous. No, not really. No. By the time I present it to them, I'm happy that it's strong. Yeah. Should I take one off of here?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, go for it.
Okay. Was Colin Newman of Wire supposed to be in Sahenty's movie? Yes, he was. We filmed him, and he's in the book, but Lasse cut his scenes out. You'd have to ask Lasse. We filmed so much for that movie, and Colin was one of the guys we talked to. And for those that don't know, Wire is a fabulous band from the late 70s and 80s that I was a massive fan of, still am a massive fan of. Yes. Let's please go back to some standing shows. Would love to rock out without getting hassled for dancing. I kind of agree. See my earlier answer. Do you smoke up before you produce? I guess he means, do I roll a joint or something? No, I don't. That's not my thing. Stephen, how do you feel about modern djent styles of progressive djent? Is that how you say it? Djent styles from bands such as Animals as Leaders, Periphery, Sky Harbor, Tesseract. I don't know any of those bands. Sorry. For me, you're talking about Meshuggah. I love that band, but to me, I'm not sure I need to hear any other bands really like that. I mean, Meshuggah for me is definitive in that particular style, and they kind of invented that style, really, didn't they? I guess. Okay.
All right. Tim says, will the shows this fall be previewing any new material?
No.
No.
I don't think I'm going to be that far down the road yet. But having said that, most of the places I'm playing in the fall, they won't have heard a lot of the stuff that we've been playing in the last few months. They won't have heard the stuff from 4.5. They won't have heard some of the other older songs I'm doing, like Don't Hate Me, Dark Matter. So there's still a lot of stuff that will be new to them, new to those people. If, for example, I'm guessing this guy's probably from America, is it? Yeah. So last time, assuming he saw us on the first leg of Hand Cannot Raise, there will be a lot of material that he won't have heard, or he or she won't have heard us play last time around. But new material, no.
There's some places actually in America that you're going to for the first time this time.
First time ever, yeah.
Yeah, there's like places like Atlanta, and well, you went to Atlanta last on the Raven tour.
Right,
And,
I get in trouble with this because sometimes I say things like, "Oh, it's the first time I've ever been to Kansas," and then people say, "No, you came here in 2004 on the Deadwing tour," and I'm like, "Okay," and that just shows you that's just symptomatic of being, on a tour bus, and sometimes you're barely aware. You wake up on the tour bus, you go into the venue, you spend all day in the venue, you do the show, you come out the venue, you get back on the bus, and you're not necessarily aware all the time exactly where you are. But I know there's definitely some places that I haven't been to.
Yeah.
I'm not going to get myself in trouble by naming them, but I know there are some. Yeah.
Sam says, what is with all the hand movements at your concerts?
Well, the funny thing is, I'm looking at the screen. I've got a screen of me. I can't believe how much I use my hands when I talk. It's best never to see yourself, isn't it, on screen? I can't believe how much it's. I don't know. I don't. Actually, some of it is actually signals to the band. Like I have certain signals which means take it up or take it down, or let's go on to the next section, or America, fuck yeah, for Adam, but no, I don't. I'm not necessarily aware of it. In fact, I'm seeing myself here, and I'm actually surprised myself how much I am using my hands. So I don't know. It must be something from my past. So I take some questions from here. Somebody's asking me about somebody called Devin Townsend. I don't know that person. Sorry. For this new record, will you have Guthrie and Marco? I don't know yet. I'm still writing material. I'd love to have as many of these guys involved as possible. That I've worked with over the years. And this record's going to be quite a diverse record, so there may be an opportunity for different people to be involved, but I definitely want my current band, involved heavily, because I think we've got a really great chemistry going now.
All right, Alex asks, love all your work, but I was wondering which of your 4 solo albums do you feel most proud of?
The last one and the first one. I love Insurgentes, the first solo album I made. It was a big break for me from what I was doing at that time with my band, just going more and more to a sort of metal area. And I wasn't feeling that so much, and I wanted to make an album that was more about electronic music, about the music I grew up with, which was post-punk music, bands like Wire, Joy Division, Magazine, The Cure, Cocteau Twins, which had never really come out in my music before, and I made that record very much drawing on that. And I never really made another record like that after that. I kind of got sidetracked, I got involved in the more kind of classic rock side for the last few records. But I think it's coming back a bit on the new writing, the new stuff I'm writing. And the last one, I just think because conceptually and musically everything came together on Hand Cannot Raise in a way that I couldn't really have planned. The concept, was a gift. The music just seemed to come naturally out of that. Lyrics came very easily, lyrics that seemed to be very much about the now, living in the 21st century, about the problems that we all have, about isolation and loneliness in the 21st century, in the age of technology, and the age of the internet. And it just all came together. The artwork that Lasse produced, the blog, the films that we have in the live show, the music just seems to carry you forward in a way. Again, you know, this is something that I couldn't have planned. It's just sometimes things just fall into place beautifully. And you know, Robert Fripp has this thing he told me, and he said that, and I really believe it's true. He says there's no such thing as musical geniuses. Genius is like a abstract concept that temporarily visits people and then moves on to someone else. And he says that it temporarily visited King Crimson in 1969, the first album, and then it moved on to whoever, Pink Floyd or whoever, or Neil Young, whoever. And then it stayed with them for a while, and then it moved on to someone else. And listen, I'm not saying Hand Cannot Raise is a work of genius, but I'm saying that I feel that for whatever reason, the spirit was there on that record, and everything just came together beautifully on Hand Cannot Raise. In a way that not through not trying, I was certainly trying, but perhaps it didn't come together quite so well on other records I've made. So I would say Insurgentes and Hand Cannot Raise. Yeah.
Greg says, when's the next Bass Communion album due?
Wow, I haven't done... It's funny, I've developed music for Bass Communion for live performance, because I've done, I did a performance live and we developed a piece, but I haven't recorded it properly. I guess I've been so sidetracked with everything else, the solo work, that I haven't really thought too much about Bass Communion for a few years now. You know what I need to do? I need to do a new record. It's one of those things, it's very easy for me sometimes to think, when I do Bass Communion records, oh, no one's really listening, you know, because it is a very small percentage of my fans that I think listen to the Bass Communion work. But I guess that there are some people out there that do appreciate that. Maybe there's even some people out there for whom it's their favourite thing I do. It's certainly one of my favourite things I do. I love doing those, working with pure sound and pure texture. For me, a bit like with the solo records, it's a question of finding something that would be different to everything I've done before. You know, with ambient music, with drone music, it's very easy to get into a pattern where you can just, you know, make that music by the yard, you know. And I think it would be a question of finding some kind of instrumental combination or sound that I wanted to explore in a Bass Communion context. Yeah, I should do a new record. I will maybe think about that for the next year or two.
Ethan asks, in our age of distraction, how do you keep yourself so focused and prolific?
I don't watch TV ever. I don't play computer games ever. And I don't have any kids. I have a dog. But honestly, you'd be amazed. And by the way, I'm not judging anyone that has all those three things in their life. It's fine. But you'd be amazed if you don't have those things in your life. You'd be amazed how much time you suddenly have on your hands. I work pretty much every day, you know, and I find things to do in the studio every day because I'm not having to deal with kids. I don't have kids. That's a personal choice. And I don't watch TV, and I like to watch movies, you know, but I don't follow people. You know, a lot of people say to me, have you seen this new American show on HBO? And I don't watch any of those shows because to me it's like, why would I spend 50 hours of my life with somebody else, you know, watching somebody else live their life? I'd rather spend those 50 hours living my life than 50 hours watching someone else live their life. So I struggle with the kind of these shows that go on for season after season, and I don't get into those, and so I find I have a lot of time on my hands.
Scott asks, any chance of future collaborations with Marius Duda from Riverside? The old piece was really great. Yeah,
that was a really beautiful piece, wasn't it? But I'm sure people know the background to that. That was actually done for a specific reason. It was done for a young fan of ours that died of cancer, very young, and called Alex. And he, it's almost like his dying wish in a way, was that his two favourite artists, which are me and Marius, would collaborate on a song using his poem. So we did that kind of as a one-off. I don't know if we'd not talked before that about ever doing something together, but we certainly enjoyed doing that track. And I think it came out really beautifully. And we've actually talked about maybe releasing that on a single at some point. So we'd have to come up with something for the other side. So I think we definitely do at least a B-side for that song.
Is there any more from the chat that you want to
Let's
ask?
have a look. Who's your favourite Italian prog band? I really like Aria. Aria, however you say it. Aria, that band, they're great. The stream is breaking up for me. Okay, that's not a question. Have you got the project to do a DVD on the Hand Cannot Race tour? Okay, this is a question I think we get asked a lot on Facebook, isn't it? The simple answer is I planned to film one of the shows on Hand Cannot Race, and I never got around to it. And so unfortunately, there's not going to be a document of this particular tour, which in a way is a shame. Although part of me also thinks, if you want to see the show, come and see the show, because there's no substitute for seeing the show seeing the spectacle of the show. Now I understand also there are some people that are never going to be able to see the show. People who live in Iran or something, never going to be able to see the show. And I'm sorry about that. There isn't a kind of document there isn't going to be a document of this tour. But time has caught up with me, and I never got around to it. I wanted to do something really interesting. I wanted to do something in an interesting location, and we did get as far as budgeting filming in this very exotic location, and the costs were astronomical. So I had to knock that idea on the head. And also, I'm not sure people buy live DVDs anymore. It's a very expensive thing to do. If recording an album costs, say, this much money, recording a live DVD can cost 3 or 4 times what it costs to make an album. And no one buys live DVDs anymore. The market has basically dropped out completely. If you think the market has dropped for CDs, it actually has, but it's still there. I'm not sure the market for live DVDs is there at all, because people just want to go to YouTube and watch stuff. And so if I'm looking at spending $100,000 on shooting a live DVD, it's a difficult thing to justify now, actually. Having said that, I do want to do a live document of the current repertoire, but I think it's probably going to be next album cycle now. We've kind of missed it for this one.
All right, Rohan asks, what football club do you support, Stephen?
I kind of follow Arsenal in the Premiership and Watford also, who are also in the Premiership now. Watford because they're local; they're the most local team to here, and Arsenal because when I left school, I went to work for a computer company, and my best friend at that company was an Arsenal supporter, so I kind of started to get swept along with it, and I've always followed it. And I think Arsene Wenger seems like a very sincere guy. So Arsenal and Watford.
Yeah. All right, Gaurav says, do you ever consider writing a book about music or perhaps an autobiography?
I've started writing about 8 books over the last 10 years and never finished any of them. And believe it or not, I have been approached by some publishers. Apparently I'm enough of a name to justify someone wanting to publish my work. And I don't want to do just a straight autobiography. I want to do something more interesting and more surreal that perhaps could also be have some form of autobiographical content. Or, I mean, as you can tell, I like to talk a lot about music, and I think maybe there's a book there somewhere where I talk about my ideas about music, about the way the music industry is going, and my philosophies, and so again, it's something that I think inevitably will happen eventually, time-wise.
Yeah. Chip says, what part of the show do you look forward to the most every night, and at what point do you feel the most relief at having gotten through the tough bits?
I look forward to doing Sleep Together. There's a little run in the set right now, which I really look forward to doing, which is Vermilion Core, Sleep Together, and The Raven That Refused to Sing. Just because I love playing all 3 of those songs. They're so dramatic. All 3 of them are so dramatic, especially when we do Vermilion Core and Sleep Together behind the transparent gauze, And I really look forward to that part of the show, which is kind of towards the end of the show. There's really nothing that I just want to get it over with, you know what I mean? If there was, I wouldn't be playing it. I don't feel like I should have to play stuff, because I think the audience can tell they can kind of pick up on if you're not really digging playing something, and if you're kind of going through the motions or doing it because you feel like you have to, I think they can pick up on that. So I kind of decided a long time ago not to do that, you know. And I'm lucky because I don't have any hits, you know. If I had written once upon in my life, if I'd written a big hit, there would be the expectation that I would always play that. And I'm in the fortunate position of having been unfortunate. And I've never had a big hit, so I guess people don't necessarily feel cheated if they don't hear, or maybe they do, I don't know, but I certainly don't feel like I have to play something just for the sake of it. So there isn't really a part of the show I dread, no.
Alright, Richard asks, if Stephen Wilson had the opportunity to collaborate on a new album project with either David Gilmour or Roger Waters, which musician would he prefer to work with?
Well, honestly, neither, because, you know, no disrespect to either of them. I think they're well past the point where they're at a creative peak, and I would rather work with people at a creative peak. I would rather work with Michael Ackerfeld, who is at a creative peak, quite honestly, than, you know, as much as I adore the work of both of them, you know, and the music means so much to me. I have to also concede that all the music they did that really means a lot to me is at least 30 years ago, and I don't think they're ever going to get back to that creative place, and they probably would admit it themselves. So honestly, neither. I'd rather work with Aphex Twin, Richard James, or you know, Michael Ackerfeld, or you know, or Boards of Canada, or you know, someone I feel is really at a kind of creative, like at their peak right now, or Marius from Riverside. You know, these guys I think for me are in the prime of their creativity. So rather than working with people that made their best work, amazing though it is, peerless though it may be, 30 or 40 years ago.
All right, Ryan asks, what is your favourite XTC album?
All of them. They're my favourite band. It's difficult. It's like picking one of your favourite kids. I love Drums and Wires. I love Black Sea. I love Skylarking. I love Mama. I love Apple Venus. I would have a hard time picking between those five, to be honest. And then I love all the others too, you know. They're one of those bands I think, and this is kind of in a way comes back to what I was saying about my own catalogue. Every XTC album feels like it has a very distinct sound and kind of world that it inhabits that makes it distinctly different to everything else in the catalogue. And there aren't many bands like that. The Beatles were one of those bands, you know. So it's tough to pick one. How are we doing for time, guys?
Yeah, we're just over an hour. Yeah. Saga has a question, which is very simple.
Okay.
Cats or dogs?
All animals. All animals. No, really. I mean, I have a dog, but I love cats. My mum has a cat. All animals. You know, I'm a great believer that animals have just as much right to exist on this planet than we do. In fact, possibly more so, because they haven't done their best to fuck it up, like we have. And I believe they have just as much right to live on this planet as we do, which is partly why I'm a vegetarian. And I just, you know, I love all animals, quite simply.
Do you want to take one last question from there?
Yeah, we'll take one last question from here. Let's make it a fantastic one. Blah blah blah. Ask me another one while I'm choosing.
Yeah. All right. Andy asks, "Hi Stephen, any plans to reissue Deadwing on vinyl?"
It's not up to, I would love to issue on Deadwing. Deadwing and In Absentia are totally tied up with Warner Brothers, and a lot of people may know that Warner Brothers now are obliged to sell a lot of the Mergers and Monopolies Commission basically told Warners they had to sell some of their assets, meaning some of their catalogue. So, for example, the Radiohead catalogue has now been sold to XL for however many million, and one of the things that Warners are trying to do is sell the Porcupine Tree back catalogue. In the meantime, that means no one can reissue it, no one can revamp it, no one can license it, no one can do vinyl pressings. We're kind of stuck with the current editions that we have, which to me need to be remastered and repackaged. And I don't know how long that situation is. It's been going on for years now. So those albums are kind of in limbo, unfortunately. Okay, his last question here. The best show of all time is asked by Yatin, I think you say his name. No doubt, Prince is the best live performer I have ever seen. For me, I think he's the best live performer we will ever see. The guy was a genius, and he had everything. He had charisma, he could dance, he could sing, he could play guitar, he could play drums, he could play bass, he could play keyboards, he could write great songs. He had this concept for a show. He was a fashion icon. He had everything, and I saw him play a few times during his lifetime, and every time it was like, oh yeah, that's how you do it. That's how you be a rock star. And still to this day, I think his show at the NEC, not the NEC, the O2 in 2007, where he did 21 nights, and I saw a couple of those shows. That's still the best show I've ever seen. And it's hard. It's hard to play a show to 15,000 people and make them all feel like they're part of this big party. And he completely did it. Genius.
All right then.
Okay.
Yeah. Thanks so much for everyone for watching.
Thank you very much, guys.
Yeah.
I hope you enjoyed it, and maybe we'll do it again sometime. If you tell me you enjoyed it, then we'll do it again. If you tell me you hated it, then we'll just think of this as a big mistake, and we'll never do it again. Oh, my keyboard's gone off. Oh, the volume's down. Here we go. Right, let me just get my... There you go. It's my new direction. Bye.